And that's really what made me want to make this video in the first place, candidly. Because had I known that going into book one, would I have made the decision to read all 3 books? Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be taking a look at the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Now, I'm going to aspire as much as possible to keep this review spoiler-free. The purpose of this video truly is, if you're someone who has not yet read this series, to try and at least give my personal opinion on, frankly, whether it's worth it. Now, this is obviously a book series that is incredibly well-reviewed. It has fantastic scores in places like Goodreads and Amazon. It won the Hugo Award 3 years in a row, which is, I think, the first time a book series has ever done that before or since. And it's a book that has a lot of very strong critical acclaim. So I'm just going to try and present the facts to you as much as possible and sort of let you make your own decisions. That's sort of the absolute goal and purpose of this video is when I'm done, should you go ahead and take the plunge in this. So let's get some obvious housekeeping out of the way. I am a white guy. This series in particular is a very strong allegory to the plight of African Americans in the United States. It's not subtle about it and tackles, honestly, what is a super complex and nuanced issue about the oppression the Black people have faced in America. And I think does a really good job of looking at it through a science fiction and fantasy lens. Additionally, the protagonist of this series is a middle-aged Black woman, and one of the central themes to it is motherhood. Again, not things that I can personally relate to. I mean, if we're talking about like angles of which to view something with personal attachment, I'm striking out here across the board. There are basically no elements of this where I feel like a super strong personal connection to. I'm looking at this as someone who has none of those things. I'm just looking at it as a book series. And I also want to continue to say that not everything needs to be for everyone. Like, Paul, this book series just wasn't written for you. 100% true. Absolutely 100% correct. But it's funny because all of those saying all those things, none of those, I thought all of those things were super well done, super high handled. How the characters in this book are amazing. I thought it was a really interesting world and setup and setting. And I thought the way that these sort of issues were tackled was super tastefully done. The issues that I have with this book series were almost entirely due to the plot. So kind of completely irrelevant to everything else. But again, I'm going to just put forward what this book series is about. And again, some of the themes and things that it tackles, and let you make your own decision. Because I'll be honest, this one's right on the line for me. There are so many things about this series that I absolutely adored, and a couple of key things that I basically couldn't get over. So I just kind of want to talk about, at least for me, how those sort of two things interplayed. Now, let's talk about the book series. I'll start with the description of the first book. This is the way the world ends for the last time. It starts with a great red rift across the heart of the world's sole continent, spewing ash that blots out the sun. It starts with death, with a murdered son and a missing daughter. It starts with betrayal, and a long dormant wound rising up to fester. This is the stillness, a land familiar with catastrophe, where the power of the earth is wielded as a weapon, and where there is no mercy. Now that's a sick... Oh, that's cool. Like, as back of book blurbs go, that's definitely up there. And I have to say, this first book, the 5th season, was awesome from cover to cover. There's one thing about it I dislike, but again, it's a very personal thing for me. This book is like, if I had a 10-star rating, this is really damn close to being a 10-star. There are very few things that I dislike about this book, which makes the subsequent decline of the next two really tough for me. So one of the things that's really interesting about this book series, and sort of before I get into the plot too much, is it's very clear that Jemisin wrote this in one go. These are 3 books. I imagine them, though, that were basically written as one manuscript. The first scene of the first book is connected to the last scene of the last book, which means that this was not a pantsed book, I don't think, by any means. This was planned from beginning to end. Things that are relevant, again, at the very beginning of the first book are relevant right at the end of the third book. And that's super cool. You do not see that too often. And that sort of foresight I thought was super interesting. But it also made the issues that I have with some plot decisions later in the last book, especially, all that more annoying, because it's obvious that that was the plan all along. It's not like she wrote herself into a corner and had to make hasty decisions. No, this was the plan. So that's kind of one thing that kind of bugs me. So basic premise of the first book, and this spans over the course of this, is that it's about a woman trying to find her daughter in the apocalypse. That's the core premise. When you can distill the entire core premise of a whole book series, the through line of a book series, to one sentence, that's freaking strong. That is a very strong premise. Now, I want to say this is, and I should say now, as I censor myself on the swearing, this is a very adult book series. Whether it's the gratuitous violence, the swearing, the random polyamorous throuple, we get thrown in. Hell yeah, go for it. This is a very adult book with adult themes. And there are some really graphic scenes involving sort of the abuse of children as well. So if those are not things that you're interested in, just be aware of that going into it. But yeah, that's sort of the basic premise of the book. Again, in a nutshell, is again a woman trying to find her daughter during the apocalypse. Now, the magic system in this book is very interesting. So I say magic system, well, we'll get to that in a bit. The magic system in this book is set up in a very sort of sci-fi-esque way, in that all humans have these glands in their necks called sesapanae, which allows you to sense things. That thing specifically being sort of the energy that flows through the earth. So specifically geothermal energy is generally what's talked about, but it can extend beyond that as well, including the energy of your own body and other people's bodies. Now, this magic system is really interesting. It's definitely more of a hard magic system. And I thought it was well done. It was introduced very slowly over the course of the first book. And then sort of you have these moments of fits and starts where you're like, wow, okay, I get to learn a little bit more about it. And it just felt, again, very well thought out, very interesting. Again, the land that the main characters inhabit, called the Stillness, goes through these things called seasons. And seasons are basically these small mini eras. I guess if you're thinking about like a stable era versus unstable era, I'm reading Three Body, where some manner of terrible event will happen. It could be volcanoes erupting. It could be gases leaking from something. It could be, plagues or locusts or any manner of horrible things that can happen to humans will and can and have happened over the course of this going back and back and back history. And through this time period, humans have developed what is called stone lore, basically, which is the stuff that's meant to survive in between these desolations, if we're talking sort of Sanderson-esque stuff. And it really has sort of shaped the society that people have built. And the idea that community is incredibly important. The idea is that community sort of will sort of rope themselves off and sort of be self-contained while these horrible things happen. So you need to make sure that you have a strong community, that you have your stores, that you can survive for years potentially in horrible conditions. Again, that's really shaped the environment and the people and the world that these characters are inhabiting. The world building in this is phenomenal. You really get a very clear sense of sort of how all of these things work together, and it's shown to you in a really interesting and unique way, layered on top of prose that is very interesting. Now, Jemisin gets a lot of praise for her prose, and I think very justifiably so, but this is where sort of my first, if I had any gripe about this series, this is where the first one really comes in, because there is a good chunk of these books that's done in second person. Yeah, not one that I'm a super big fan of. Not super keen. First person, you're all familiar with. I did this. I did that. Third person, Essen, she did this. She did that. Okay, cool. You get this. I'm going to read to you a little bit of the second person so you get a sense of what this is about. Oh boy. I'm reading a lot recently. What's happening? All right. You are she. She is you. You are Essen, remember? The woman whose son is dead. You're an Origine, who's been living in the little nothing town of Tiramo for 10 years. Only 3 people here know what you are, and 2 of them you gave birth to. Well, 1 left who knows now. For the past 10 years, you've lived as an ordinary life as possible. You came to Tiramo from elsewhere. The townsfolk don't really care where or why. Since you were obviously well educated, you became a teacher at the local creche for children aged 10 to 13. You're neither the best teacher nor the worst. The children forget you when they move on, but they learn. The butcher probably knows your name because she likes to flirt with you. The baker doesn't because you're quiet. And because, like everyone else in town, he just thinks of you as Gija's wife. Nah. Yeah, don't. I'm used to it. I'm more used to it now. But when I first picked up the book, and that was sort of how it's introduced, that's like the first chapter. There's a little intro section before that. I really struggled. I think I read 30 or 50 pages of this book and put it down and came back to it. I read this, so for context, I read this book last year. I read the series rather in 2023. And I came back to it a couple weeks later, really determined to try and give it another shot. And I sort of forced myself and powered through, and you kind of get a sense of, you know, how this narrator is interacting with the character and the tone of voice. It starts to make a little bit more sense, and then makes a lot more sense as the book goes on. And again, it's a really great setup, and there's a lot of great setup that happens in this first book. I think this first one especially, and I'm going to give a lot of praise for the 5th season because it was far and away my favorite of the 3. There were 2 things in it that it makes you think the whole time. One is a very, very thin thread that weaves the entire way through and then is paid off at the end. And the other one is a little bit more obvious. There's sort of 2 big reveals that happen over the course of the book. And again, the one that's more obvious, I guessed pretty early on, but it was still an enjoyable book, even knowing sort of where that went. And then the second one, the last line of the first book was so compelling to me, had such a mic drop plot twist moment that I went and bought the next 2 books the next day. That's how good it was. I don't think that's ever happened to me with this first book in a series ever. I was like, oh crap, I need to see where this goes. And then the next 2 books proceeded to end up where they were supposed to end up, but did so in a way that I didn't overly love. There were a lot of sort of plotting subplots, plotting with a D, or 2 Ds. And some of the decisions that were made around characters, I didn't adore. I think things ended up becoming needlessly complex just to further justify the story. One of the biggest things I disliked is that there was the addition of a second magic system. This is a little bit of a spoiler, but I think it's worth noting. Because we have our characters, our core group of characters who are origins, like I talked about before. They have the ability to manipulate energy and instill earthquakes, and that's sort of their job and their backbone in this. They're utilized by the government, and they're controlled and manipulated by the government to stop earthquakes as being one of the main ones. And they are horribly oppressed, and they are forced into breeding programs, and it's horrendous. And again, a strong allegory to the plight of African Americans in the United States. And that's super interesting and super well done, and such an interesting concept and through line, and the way it is executed is fantastic. But then the author made the decision that I have my already special group of characters, and I need to make them more special by adding another more amorphous, very soft magic system on top that I don't think was ever described particularly well. And I really dislike that. I think she built such a fantastic foundation, and then she threw a lot of it away. It felt very like anime to me. It was like, we've got our special characters, but they need to be more special. And I was like, really? Like, again, you built yourself such a great first steps, and then just proceed to go, no. And I just, no, there's got to be something else. There's got to be something else. And I was just like, I don't know. That element definitely didn't sit super well with me, because I liked the harder magic system. I like soft magic systems as well. Like, again, I'm someone who grew up with Lord of the Rings. But I didn't love the way this was unfolded here. And there was a really cool sort of, again, this thread that was weaved about sort of the fact that there is leftover technology from some elder civilization, and uncovering the truth of this elder civilization. And the realities behind it, candidly, for me, just didn't end up being that interesting. It really just wasn't that interesting. It was just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I figured it was about that. And there is a reveal around sort of one of the grander antagonist of this world that was, candidly, this is my opinion, it was so dumb I almost just put the book down. It was the dumbest reveal. I'm sorry. We're like more than halfway through book 3. I have read like 1,000 pages of this series, and I almost DNF'd it halfway through the 3rd book because I just went, really? Because the world and the characters, this takes itself seriously. This is a serious book with serious themes and serious characters that make hard decisions, that experience real growth and progression and learning over the course of it. And there is a moment that is just so like, what the fuck? I was just like, really? And almost only through sheer force of, but at that point too, I was so like uninvested in the book at that point that the ending was just so mad to me. And I appreciate that this is kind of a me thing. I did see a discussion on Reddit recently where this kind of plot point came up, and I wasn't totally alone in being kind of like, what? In the third book. And that's really what made me want to make this video in the first place, candidly. Because had I known that going into book one, would I have made the decision to read all 3 books? And the answer is, I honestly don't know. I honestly don't know if I would have made the monetary investments, whatever, but would I have made the investment of time and energy to read 1,200 pages of a book series that ended up just kind of being okay? And again, it started off so incredibly strong. It made it a lot tougher as sort of the books progressed. And again, following the journey of this woman and the quest for her daughter and her uncovering the mysteries and the magic of the world and the history and why things are the way they are, and is there a way to fix it and overcome it, and is there a way to put the broken pieces back together in a way that actually makes sense and fit, and at what cost? Like, these are such cool, awesome, and epic themes. But there are just some elements that really bugged me. And again, I know that these are obviously personal opinions from one person. And again, if you're someone who I may have hooked you off the rip, you're like, wow, this is not a young protagonist. Romance is an element of the book series, but it's not critical to, like, it's a part of it, but it's not like core to it. Again, expressing the themes of motherhood. Again, talking about the idea of persecution and race. These are things that are not often delved into in modern science fiction and fantasy. And this is done in an incredibly well done in its execution. That may hook you right off the rip. And everything else that I'm saying, you're like, I'm going to overcome the second person. Maybe I'll disagree on the plot points. At which point, go enjoy these books and come back and let me know in the comments. Did you enjoy this book series? Or if you've already read them, what do you think? And can you guess the thing that I'm thinking of 2/3 of the way through the third book? Because wow, really a visceral image of what the fuck. So yeah, that's my final response is the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. Is it worth reading? To some people, absolutely. It will absolutely be worth reading. It will absolutely be a book series that I can see that clearly hundreds of thousands of people have enjoyed. But if you're someone who, if you're someone who maybe doesn't have the same kind of personal connection to these themes, if you're someone who doesn't necessarily love second-person prose, and if you're someone who is pretty particular about their magic systems and continuity and the idea that dumb characters making dumb decisions or things that are, again, I don't even know how to describe this review without spoiling things. It's just silly. It's just a silly moment. If you can take all those things aside, go and read and enjoy this book. But if what I've said has put you off maybe a little bit, or maybe made you second guess, go watch more reviews on the series. I guarantee there are other people with different opinions than myself. And again, this won the Hugo Award 3 years in a row. This is a very well critically acclaimed book series. So again, take all of this with a grain of salt, one additional person's opinion, but I just wanted to put this out there because I truly don't know the answer. And maybe I'm hoping that this discussion, because this is what BookTube is all about, right? Maybe this discussion can help sort of sway me one way or the other, because I honestly don't know whether or not I think this series was worth it. So yeah, a bit of a different review here. And again, if folks are more curious about sort of my thoughts and want to hear maybe more about what I didn't dislike, if you want to see a more full in-depth spoiler review of the ending and why I thought it didn't stick the landing, I'm also potentially open to doing that as well. So let me know in the comments what you guys think. Did you guys love the series? Did you dislike it? Yeah, let me know in the comments down below. And if you like this and want to see more content, or if you're mad and want to let me know about it, again, feel free to subscribe, like, or don't. Let me know. I'm all about the discussion here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments. All right, that's it for me. I got more stuff coming down the pipe. So like I said, if you want to subscribe, do so. And I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.